CPO, the new AI buzzword, or co-packaged optics. The idea that eventually optics move directly beside the GPU or the networking switch, reducing power consumption, improving efficiency, and potentially changing the future of AI infrastructure. And long term, CPO could absolutely become massive. But I think there's something the market may be underestimating right now: the transition period before CPO fully scales. Because AI infrastructure demand is exploding today and not 5 years from now. And before CPO becomes dominant, the current optical ecosystem may still need to scale massively, which means there could be several companies positioned to benefit during this transition phase. So in today's video, we're going to break down why AI networking is becoming one of the biggest bottlenecks in the industry, why CPO may still take time to fully roll out, and 4 companies that could potentially benefit before that happens. And those companies are Applied Optoelectronics, Lumentum, Sivers, and COHR. So let's get into it. The AI conversation for the last couple years has mostly been about chips, NVIDIA, AMD, training clusters, compute. But now the bottleneck is starting to shift, because once you build these massive AI clusters, the GPU need to communicate with each other constantly. And the bigger the cluster becomes, the more data needs to move across the network, faster, more efficiently, with lower power consumption. Some next generation AI clusters are expected to contain hundreds of thousands of GPUs. And every time GPUs communicate, data has to move through an increasingly massive optical network. That means the AI revolution isn't just creating demand for chips, it's creating the infrastructure connecting them. And that's where optics comes in, because copper connections start running into problems at these extreme speeds. Heat increases, power consumption rises, signal degradation becomes an issue, distance limitations becomes a problem. And this is why optical networking is becoming so important inside the AI infrastructure. And this isn't just some niche discussion anymore. The entire AI infrastructure industry is now talking about higher bandwidth, 1.6 trillion networking, power efficiency, and optical scaling challenges. This is becoming one of the central themes behind next generation AI data centers. Now, eventually, many people believe CPO becomes the long-term solution. Co-packaged optics, which basically means integrating optics closer to the switch or the GPU itself. And the potential benefits are huge: lower power, lower latency, higher density, and potentially much better scaling. But here's the important part: just because the CPO may eventually dominate does not mean the transition happens overnight. There are still major challenges: manufacturing complexity, thermal management, reliability, serviceability, cost, ecosystem readiness. And because one of the biggest emerging problems in AI is not just compute anymore, it's electricity. Some AI data centers are already running power constraints. And as networking speeds continue increasing, moving data efficiently becomes critical. And that's why lower power optical solutions are becoming such an important theme across the industry. Because of that, there may be a multi-year transition period where the current optical infrastructure still sees enormous demand growth. That's the thesis behind this video. This is not an anti-CPO. This is the bridge before CPO. And that's where these 4 companies come in. The first company is Applied Optoelectronics, or AAOI. AAOI is one of the more direct beneficiaries of current AI optical demand, because right now pluggable optics still dominate the architecture. AI clusters still require enormous amounts of transceivers and optical interconnects. And as hyperscalers continue rapidly expanding AI infrastructure, they still need enormous amounts of pluggable optical hardware today, and not years from now, but today. That's one of the reasons companies tied to current transceiver demand continue attracting attention. And as hyperscalers continue building larger and larger AI networks, the amount of optical hardware required also increases dramatically. And that benefits companies like AAOI. Now, obviously, this is still a competitive industry, and there are risks, and margins can fluctuate. Customer concentration matters. Demand cycles matter. But if the transition period before full CPO adoption lasts longer than expected, AAOI could potentially remain an important player for longer than many investors realize, especially if the AI infrastructure spending continues accelerating. The next company is Lumentum, stock ticker LITE. Lumentum is more of the established scale player in the space. The company has exposure to lasers, optical networking, telecom infrastructure, and broader photonics demand. This matters because AI networking isn't just about GPUs anymore. It's about moving massive amounts of data efficiently. And as AI data centers scale, the laser demand may continue increasing alongside optical deployment. Lumentum already operates inside this ecosystem. This is not some tiny speculative startup. This is an established optical infrastructure company tied into many parts of the industry. And one of the reasons I like looking at companies like LITE is because it gives exposure to the broader infrastructure trend itself. It's not just one single architecture winner. And as AI infrastructure spending accelerates, companies already embedded inside the optical supply chain may continue seeing increasing demand. And Lumentum is already positioned inside that ecosystem today. The third company is Sivers, SIVE or SIVEF on the stock ticker. And this is where things get really interesting because Sivers is positioning itself inside next generation optical infrastructure, particularly around indium phosphide lasers and high-speed optical communication. Now, one of the biggest themes emerging inside AI infrastructure is power efficiency. AI data centers are consuming enormous amounts of electricity, and one of the biggest bottlenecks moving forward may actually become power availability itself. That means improving efficiency across networking infrastructure becomes incredibly important. Sivers has been involved in discussions around 1.6T optical modules, external laser source architectures, and lower power optical solutions. And the company's already connected to major ecosystem players and partnerships. And one of the reasons investors are paying attention to companies like Sivers is because the industry may eventually require millions of high-speed optical laser components to support the next generation AI networking demand. And if optical demand accelerates faster than expected, smaller suppliers with differentiated technology could become increasingly important. Now, obviously, this is still a much smaller company than some of the others on the list, which means higher risk. But it also has potential to create much larger upside if adoption accelerates and the company successfully executes. And I think this is one of the reasons the stock has started attracting more investor attention recently. Because people are beginning to realize that AI infrastructure is not just about the chips or the GPUs, it's about the entire optical ecosystem behind them. And the fourth company is Coherent. And Coherent is interesting because it acts like a pick and shovel supplier to the broader optical ecosystem. Lasers, photonics, materials, optical components. Instead of making one concentrated bet, Coherent touches multiple layers of the infrastructure stack. And sometimes during technological transitions, the safest way to play the trend is owning the company, selling the tools everyone needs. That's the role Coherent potentially plays. Because regardless of which architecture ultimately wins long-term, the overall demand for optical infrastructure may still continue increasing significantly, and Coherent is positioned across several of those areas. So instead of trying to predict one exact winner, Coherent benefits from broader optical infrastructure growth itself. Now, stepping back, I think the most important takeaway from this entire discussion is the timeline, because the market often jumps straight to the final outcome. But infrastructure transitions usually happen in phases. Today, you have pluggable optics that still dominate. During the transition, bandwidth demand explodes, power consumption rises, and networking complexity increases. And then eventually CPO may scale much larger long term, but the market still may be underestimating how much investment still happens before we fully get there. And that's why I think this theme is so interesting right now, because the transition itself may create opportunities, not just the final destination. And the market may already understand where AI networking is going long term. But sometimes the best investment opportunities happen before the final architecture fully arrives. Now, obviously, there are all different companies with different risk profiles. Some are larger and more established, and some are more speculative. But none of this is financial advice, and I do think the AI optical infrastructure story is becoming one of the most important themes in the market today, especially as AI data center scaling continues accelerating globally. And by the way, we're actually starting to add new members almost every day now to the channel membership. So thank you to everybody supporting the channel. Inside the membership, we're constantly researching new companies, new themes, and looking for potential 10x stock opportunities. Some of those ideas eventually make the videos, but most of them don't, because we're always digging through smaller companies, emerging technologies, infrastructure trends, defense, photonics, AI networking, and everything connected to where the market could be headed next. So if you want access to more of the research and deeper discussions, the membership link is below. Now let me know in the comments, what company do you think is best positioned before the CEO? CPO, AAOI, Lumentum, Sivers, or Coherent? And as always, this video is for education and entertainment purposes only. It's not financial advice, and we'll see you in the next one.